Set, Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss dynasty strategy, rankings, and all things NFL. So get ready to geek out on fantasy football with your host, Rich Dotson.
Welcome back into the Dynasty Nerds Podcast. I am your host, Garret Price, and today I am here with Andrew Mott. Andrew, how you doing, man?
Not doing too bad, man. It's middle point of the fantasy football season now, so it's really that point where I'm looking at playoffs and hoping that we can push some of these teams into some championships.
Yes, it is definitely that time of year, trying to figure out what moves to make, what's paying too much, what's not paying enough, all of that fun stuff. But today we got to talk about some players that are probably sitting on many of your rosters, and you're trying to figure out how much should I be worried about this player. This player has not performed up to expectations at this point. Should I be moving them for whatever I can? Should I be going to other teams and buying them low? Is it just wait and see? And so we're going to rank these players from 1, not being worried at all about this player. It's going to be just fine. Stop overreacting. Chill out, bro. To 10, holy crap. I've got to get rid of this player as soon as humanly possible because I am terrified. So we'll rank them from 1 to 10, and we'll see. We'll see if we get any 1s or 10s. I don't know. We'll see how dramatic we're feeling today. But let's start off. Andrew, why don't you give us your first guy for the panic meter here?
Yeah, so the first guy I think I'm going to nominate here is going to be Nico Collins, wide receiver for the Houston Texans. Right now, overall, the wide receiver 36 in fantasy, and that is not what we signed up for with Nico Collins going into 2025. Just looking at the last couple of games for him, the targets are there. He had 10 targets against Seattle in this one, but 4 catches for 27 yards. This Texans offense hasn't looked good, and so I'm starting to get these questions, to me, and so I'm wondering, how are you feeling here about Garret? Is Nico Collins somebody we should be worried about moving forward in Dynasty? I mean, he's 26. It's not old, but are you worried?
I'm going to put him at about a 6.5 on my panic meter here. And here's why. If you go back to a video that you and I did all the way back in I want to say it was week 2. And it was players that we are looking to sell high. It was either in week 2 or 3. And Nico Collins was a guy that I nominated. And the reason being was it wasn't that I thought he was a bad player. I think he's a fantastic player. But there was 2 big concerns. One, he's a guy that gets injured fairly frequently. So he's always missing a little bit of time here and there. In other seasons, he's missing significant time. 2, his play style is some of those big plays downfield where he can make some of the acrobatic catches. And that offensive line just is not good this year. And it's not going to get him the time at CJ Stroud. That is not going to get CJ Stroud the time to consistently be able to throw those long passes downfield with any sort of time in the pocket to really, unleash. It's going to be, scrambling, running around, trying to figure things out. And so those things they're just not conducive to how he plays the game. If it's more underneath stuff, more of an Amon-Ra St. Brown, that's fine. That's not a big deal. You need to get the ball out quick. But for his style of play, I just don't know that it's going to work. And we've kind of seen that happen. He has slowly, over the course of the season, it started off okay because he had a couple nice long plays for touchdowns. But over the course of the year, it's just not worked out. He also missed time with a concussion, which isn't even in the typical injury wheelhouse for him. But he has still found a way to miss time. So there's just a lot of ways that this can go wrong. So yeah, I'm pretty concerned. I have him at a 6.5.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. I think he's a player where maybe I'm a little bit less concerned than you are, but a lot of the concerns that you have, I echo. Maybe I just am being a little bit more, maybe a little more optimistic in my feelings towards him. But I think at the end of the day, I'm looking at this team in general in Houston, and I agree. I think the offensive line is a major problem, and especially for a guy like Nico Collins, who the superpower that Collins has possessed for us in fantasy has been the fact that he can catch, 4 or 5 passes in a game, but those go for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, that's the superpower of Nico Collins, and that's just not happening with Houston, and that's kind of affecting everybody. I think the offensive line in general is affecting everybody. We haven't had the full Woody Marks breakout that we've wanted. We haven't had Nick Chubb look good, and I think that might be for some other reasons. We haven't had, some of these other players as well. Jalen Noel hasn't really broken out. Jaden Higgins hasn't broken out. Christian Kirk has looked mediocre. Like, nobody has looked good in this offense in general, and I think a lot of it is just play calling and the offensive line and the fact that they're just put in very negative game script situations very early because of the offense, and it's just not been good for anybody. So I agree with you. I think if I have to give it a number for Nico Collins, I'm probably going to give him a 5, I think you said 6.5, right? You're a little bit more on the concerned side. I'm going to put myself right in the middle where there's signs to make me sit here and start thinking I should be concerned, but I'm not fully concerned yet.
No, it makes sense. And he's the thing that helps him is it's not a question about Nico outside of the injury stuff. It's not a question about Nico. It's the environment, everything else around him. So you do know that there could always be better days ahead with players like that. But I don't see him going anywhere, and I don't see the situation changing much anytime soon. So definitely an interesting one to keep an eye on. Well, let's stick at the wide receiver position for right now. And we just talked about the guy that is 36th overall. Let's talk about the guy that's 35th overall. And on a points per game basis, even worse than Nico Collins because he's played one extra game. But that's Brian Thomas Jr. Look, I've gotten a lot of flack for this guy in the past on, being too much of a hater and whatever. And that's fine. And it was never as much about hating the player as it was, I just thought his value was too high when we were putting him at wide receiver 6, 7, 8. Like, it just felt a little too high for me. I was more comfortable in that high end wide receiver 2 range. Well, this year it hasn't worked out. And so what's the real Brian Thomas Jr.? Is it year 1? Is it year 2? Hard to say. And we're getting trade rumors now and all kinds of different things. So for you, how worried are you about Brian Thomas Jr.?
Yeah, I think for him, I'm going to put him, oh man, I think I'm going to go a 7 with Brian Thomas. And I think that's really with the preconceived offseason notions of what we thought he could be and how he was drafted in startups, this offseason for new leagues and just the expectation. I mean, if you looked over, like you said, if you looked over at any of the KTCs or anything like that, where you were trying to figure out, like, what is the value of Brian Thomas? He was at the top of the list. There was really not a lot of names that were above him. So I think just based off of all of that, you do have to be concerned because there was an expectation and there was a perceived value that he is not returning on and not even close to returning on at this point in time. So I'm a little bit curious as to why. I mean, I have some opinions as to why it's not working out. I think a lot of it, obviously, we've seen some drops. We've seen some tendencies of him to get pretty timid and nervous when he's coming across the middle of the field and not making those catches. And also, we haven't seen the step up from Trevor Lawrence in this Liam Cohen offense, which a lot of people had baked into the analysis here of, like, if Trevor Lawrence takes the step up, you're going to have Brian Thomas and Travis Hunter both emerge. Now we're starting to see Travis Hunter emerge a little bit in this offense. Mm-hmm. It's going to be interesting to see how that pans out over the back half of the year. We're already getting reports of, maybe them operating with Travis Hunter as the number 1 or their perceived number 1 moving forward. And like you said, there was trade reports from Diana Rossini, which I'm going to take with a grain of salt because she reported for about 6 months straight that Aaron Rodgers was locked into a Vikings contract, but it is what it is. So at the end of the day, look, I am nervous about Brian Thomas. I think he's a player that I would probably have liked to tear down from in the offseason and got some fluff thrown in on top. That time has passed now. I don't think you're able to do it. So if we're talking about whether you should be buying or selling him, I think he honestly is a hold at this point in time because we need to see just a little bit more consistency before I think the market even reacts to him positively. But as far as worry and concern goes, I'm afraid that, whatever he was, you said wide receiver 6 or 7 or wherever that was at the beginning of the offseason, I'm afraid those prices may not ever see Brian Thomas ever again.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And actually, 7 was the number that I had down for Brian Thomas Jr. as well. So we're in the same boat on this one. And part of it is the way that I saw him when I was evaluating tape was a really, really good Z. Maybe not necessarily an X receiver, because what he did the best was stretching the field vertically and going up and making plays. It wasn't, a full route tree. It wasn't like there were some limitations there. Thought he got off the line real well, which was nice, but and he has the length to do some of those kinds of things. So sometimes those guys still can translate to top 12 receivers. So it's not saying that it's impossible for that to happen, but he fit more of that lane in an offense, I thought, better than a traditional X. Whereas Travis Hunter profile to me is more of a traditional X. So I can see why this Jaguars offense might be considering kind of switching how they do things, because I think that's what would be best for both players. And I do think we would get a slight tick up for Brian Thomas Jr. because I think, yes, it might be more inconsistent week to week, but over the course of a whole season, I think we would get better numbers from him than what we're getting right now. Now, the injury things are a little weird. There's been rumblings that he's been injured, but we haven't really seen it show up as much, and he's not actually missed any time. And yeah, now there's the trade rumors as well, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. Those are tough. Like, depending on what team he gets traded to and how they use him in the offense, it could be, he gets traded to Buffalo and you're like, holy cow, that's amazing for his value. Like, you feel great about it. But then he could get traded to, it's tough to say because I would assume it'd be a contender, but he would fit on a lot of different builds. So, you put him in, I can't even think of one that I would love right now, but like the Raiders, that could use a top end receiver. And you're like, I don't know how I feel about that. So it depends on where he would go, how good that would be for his value moving forward. But look, at the end of the day, to sell him now, I think would be a mistake. If you were going to sell him, it was going to be in the offseason. It was going to be in the first 2 to 3 weeks when people were like, chill out. It's Brian Thomas. He's going to be fine. But by now, the market has caught up to his production. And trying to sell him at today's prices is probably the low point. Now, could it get worse? It always could. But I don't see it getting much worse than this. He is still a young first-round receiver that has shown the ability to be a wide receiver 1. So the prices aren't going to dip too much further. So if anything, even a guy that has not been the biggest BTJ fan, I would buy right now. Like, I would consider going out and buying. But I'm definitely not selling at this moment.
Yeah, and this is an offense that I had kind of mentioned to have some pause over in the offseason because everybody got really excited about the Liam Cohen addition and how good that could be for this offense. And then obviously Travis Hunter was drafted. And I mentioned something, in probably June or late April, right after the NFL draft, where it was, if you're going to believe in the Jacksonville Jaguars this offseason or this year in general, you have to believe one of these things. You have to believe that Trevor Lawrence is good enough that he's going to be able to support the 2 top-end wide receivers that they have here that we're viewing and being drafted as wide receiver 1s, frankly, for fantasy football, or being viewed as potential wide receiver 1s for fantasy football. If not, you have to believe that Travis Hunter is that much better than Brian Thomas that he will supplant him, and that's going to tell you how you have to react to Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas's market. Or you have to believe that Brian Thomas is so good that he's going to keep Travis Hunter off of the football field. And so far, it's kind of been Trevor Lawrence just isn't good enough so far to support both. And that's kind of hurt both of them. Neither one of these guys has taken over the offense, and Trevor Lawrence hasn't elevated it. So it's kind of just where we're at.
Yep. Very, very unfortunate. All right, Andrew, who's your second guy that we need to rank on the panic meter?
Yeah, I'm going to take us to maybe a guy that might be a personal thorn in your side because he's keeping one of your takes from the offseason looking like one of the greatest takes of the offseason for you. And it's going to be David Njoku for the Cleveland Browns. You made a video about dark horse candidates for the number one at their position. And so far, your quarterback, your running back, your wide receiver, they all look good. The one that doesn't is David Njoku. So I got to ask you specifically, I felt like he was a good candidate for the show because right now, tight end 17, he obviously missed that week 7 game against Miami with the injury. But now the Browns are kind of talking about him as a potential trade candidate. He's had the emergence of Harold Fannin in this offense that has taken some of the looks from him, and he hasn't really gotten into the end zone. Obviously, probably a lot of that is due to the offense in general just not being that great. I know probably part of that analysis for you was the Joe Flacco part of the analysis, which is not the case anymore. But with David Njoku going forward, a 29-year-old tight end, how are you feeling about him as far as the panic meter goes?
Yeah, so the panic meter on this one's going to be interesting because I am going to put it a little lower than I feel like I wanted to put it. I ended up going with a 5.5, so still a little bit more panicked than not. But I wanted to put it higher. I wanted to be in the 7-8 range. The reason I'm not is twofold. One, I think there's a very real likelihood he does get moved. And to be honest, there's not like with Brian Thomas Jr. We were saying like, well, we don't know if it's going to be a good situation or a bad situation, blah, 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 blah. I can't think of many worse situations than what David Njoku has to deal with right now. So if that's the case, like it's an upgrade, like almost anywhere, unless he goes to the Raiders and, he's playing with multiple tight ends or something ridiculous.
Yeah, or
like
Arizona.
That.
Like that's like the only thing is if you have to go play behind McBride or Bowers.
Yeah, go play with Tyler Warren in Indy. Like, as long as it's not one of those kind of ridiculous situations, it's going to be an upgrade for him. He's going to be in an offense where they want him. And let's be real. Brian Thomas Jr., we could see a lower tier team trading for him because of the youth and all that. Those teams aren't trading for a 29-year-old tight end. It's the teams that are pushing for the playoffs. It's the teams that are pushing to try to win a championship, and they think tight end might be that missing piece for them. So I think that if that happens, better days are ahead. 2, he's a free agent at the end of this year anyway. So if he's not traded within the next, 8 weeks or whatever, obviously he can only be traded for another week or so because
I think November 4th is the deadline, I think.
Yeah, but if he's not traded before then, there's a good chance that he signs elsewhere because Harold Fannin has been good. He has been solid. Now, this is a team that wants to run 2 tight ends, so I wouldn't be surprised if, depending on if Stefanski's back or not, but that they draft somebody. But either way, for David Njoku specifically, I think the likelihood of him being a Cleveland Brown is, I would say, under 30% by the start of next season. So with that being the case, I think better days are ahead for him, but it just might not be the season. So if I had to give it a number for just 2025, it would be like an 8.5. But for his dynasty outlook, I'd put it at more like a 5.5.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I do agree with you where it feels more likely than not that he could be traded because, like you said, he's a free agent anyways. So it's either Cleveland gets something for him or nothing for him because the likelihood of him re-signing, them paying him the money with a young tight end like Fannin who has emerged on this roster, it feels irresponsible. Now, I wouldn't put it out of the wheelhouse for the Cleveland Browns to do irresponsible things with their money, but they have done that before. At the end of the day, though, I agree with you. David Njoku is a player that I am worried about for 2025, but Dynasty, no, not that worried. Obviously, he's a player that I'm not looking at and saying, like, we got a lot of meat left on the bone here with David Njoku, but for a contender, he should be fine because at 30 years old, he probably is going to give us a couple more years of relevancy, and depending on where he's going to go, that could extend into 3 or 4 years. And if that's the case, I think you're definitely excited about David Njoku. So I'm going to give you, I'm trying not to give you the same number, but I can't remember what you said. I'm going to give you a 4.5. Okay, I'm giving you a 4.5. Okay, so a little bit less than I think the middle mark there for David Njoku for me.
All right, let's move on to the quarterback position. You talked about a thorn in my side. I know this guy hasn't been as advertised so far this year. Let's go with JJ McCarthy, quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. Off season, lots of excitement, lots of hype. We get 2 games in. He has 1 really good quarter, 7 really bad quarters, and then the longest ankle injury in the history of football. And now we are at a point where it finally looks like here in week 9 he's going to get to start again. So he's been out 7 weeks with an ankle injury, which is it's a significant time to miss over the course of the season. And we even talked about some of my tinfoil hat and stuff early on in the offseason. Looks like maybe I wasn't crazy, but who knows? But all that being said, it is still only 2 games that we've gotten to see out of him at the NFL level. How worried are we about JJ McCarthy?
Yeah, I mean, as far as a lot of this goes, I could probably sit here and we could spend the rest of the show for me talking about all of my thoughts and feelings about this, but I'm going to save you guys and try and give you the Cliff Notes version of everything. But for the record here, Garrett, it was only 5 games that he missed. One of them was a bye week, so it was 6 weeks, but 5 games. So
Sure.
That's not crazy for a high ankle. We've seen guys go out and miss 4 to 6 weeks all the time. But I do think the reporting on it is what has made it very weird for a lot of people, because initially it was like, hey, he's going to miss 2 to 4. And then it was 4 to 6. And then it was like Carson Wentz is banged up, but we're still going to play Carson Wentz and we're just going to make JJ McCarthy the emergency quarterback. And now you have all of the stuff that have come out of Carson Wentz was playing through the torn labrum. And why were we playing Carson Wentz through a torn labrum if JJ McCarthy was 90% or 95% ready to go? I agree. There's a lot of weird stuff and a lot of, I think, ways that was handled that is weird. Now, a lot of this feels like Minnesota was maybe coddling the baby a little bit. And I think this is just kind of where it is. And I get it, because for people who are, just now interested in the JJ McCarthy lore, there have been, a year and a half basically at this point of lore behind it. And even before he was drafted, how Kevin O'Connell talked about development of what he wanted when he finally got a quarterback of his own. And it does resonate the way this was handled. Sloppy, in my opinion, as a fan, I'll be honest, a little bit sloppy in the way that it's been handled, but it does resonate with a lot of what he talked about, because he thinks that franchises fail quarterbacks before quarterbacks fail franchises. He believes that you can put your quarterbacks while young and immature and inexperienced in situations that hurt their development long-term. I think he's coddling JJ McCarthy to try and make it to where they're not going to be the reason why he fails. They want him to be the reason why he fails, if that is the case. Obviously, they don't want him to fail, but if it's going to be on anybody, they would rather it be on JJ McCarthy and not, have that blood on Kevin O'Connell's hands in the Minnesota Vikings. So I think he's being overly cautious. That said, this is still a very young player. Let's not forget the youngest starting quarterback in the NFL coming into week 1 this year. I think a player who certainly hasn't shown us enough good or bad to really make a strong decision about whether or not he's going to be a good player at this level or a bad player at this level. People can, jump the gun, but I don't believe that with quarterbacks specifically, progression is always linear. These guys do not come in week 1 and always look great. Yes, that happens every once in a while when a Tyrod Taylor gets his lung punctured and Justin Herbert steps in and looks like an elite guy immediately day 1. Yes, that happens. But also you have guys like, let's say Drake May, last year, he didn't look like he was setting the world on fire. He looked good.
Hey, don't talk about Drake May. He's the greatest quarterback alive.
I hear you. Guys like Caleb Williams, who, have 20 plus games of leash before people are ready to start throwing him away.
Well, you look at many of the quarterbacks right now that are succeeding, and Baker, even though his first game was good, like Baker and Darnold and Geno and all of these guys, Daniel Jones, we've seen this happen before where quarterbacks were given up on way too early.
So I give you all of my Cliff Notes version, which still feels like I'm giving you a long version of how I feel. Like I said, I could go in for days. There's a video of me on the internet last year where I said I will be rooting for JJ McCarthy like he's my firstborn son. So let that just be known that is where I'm at. But my panic meter is going to be higher than it was going into the year. I think I've seen enough where I'm like, okay, maybe there's still development needed to be had. And I think that should have been expected, but I think maybe more development than I thought needed to be had with JJ McCarthy, who did get to sit and watch his first year. I wish he would have looked a little bit better in those first 2 games. There was flashes of stuff that I liked. I'm going to give him a 4 on the panic.
Okay.
That's going to be less than the middle mark, but it is enough where I'm like, okay, I need to see JJ McCarthy come out in the second half of the season, starting this week, playing against Detroit, where we start seeing this development take place. I don't need, at this point in the time, I don't need JJ McCarthy to go out there and win a bunch of games this year. I just need to see the footwork look fine. I need to go see him make the right reads. I need to make him not turn over the football a ton. I need to go see these steps forward from a quarterback lens. And the fantasy points, we know in this system specifically, they will come eventually if you have those things under control as a quarterback. So I don't, I hate to say it. It does kind of feel like the season is a lost season here for Minnesota. And as a fan, that sucks. But my focus is on let's see JJ McCarthy develop. And I think he can develop over the back half of the year. So that's why I'm not going over that halfway mark on the panic.
Yeah, I'm a little higher than you, but then again, I'm in a similar spot to where I started, where I'm going to go again with a 5.5. A little more panicked than not, but that's kind of where I began things. And part of this was I believed in JJ McCarthy in as much as I believed in Kevin O'Connell in that offense. I believe that he is one of the best, if not the best, at preparing quarterbacks and making them look as good as they can at the NFL level and maximizing what they have. That being said, my concern was always with JJ McCarthy going back to college, which I know it's weird. We're in year 2 and we're going back to college, but we have 2 NFL games, so we don't have a lot to go off of. So going back to college, he played in an amazing, amazing offense with an incredible line, with an incredible running game, and an amazing defense where he never had to put on the cape. Can he? Maybe he can, maybe he can't. We don't know. And that was always my big thing is other guys, we've seen them have to take the game over and be the guy. And that's what you want to see out of your quarterback. Can he be the guy that is the reason your team wins? We never had to see that out of JJ McCarthy. And so that's going to be my biggest question is, can he be that guy? I don't know. Maybe he can, maybe he can't. We're going to kind of have to wait and see. Like I said, 7 quarters were rough, but we did see flashes in that 1 quarter where it was like, okay, at least for a moment, things slowed down for him. At least for a moment, he was able to hit guys in stride. At least for a moment, we were able to see that. So I am still very concerned, but it's not drastically different than what it was day 1 for me. Does that make sense, Andrew?
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And I would argue that, you said we've never seen him put the cape on. You could argue that Chicago game, he kind of did put that cape on and show that he's capable of doing that. Some of the rushing touchdowns that he wheeled his way into, like there was, like you said, there's flashes in that game that if you look at it, you say, this is the quarterback that we want all year long. We want that guy all year long.
For sure.
So I think there's definitely positive signs with him. I don't want to give him an excuse. But the 2 games we did see him play in, there was no Christian Darrisaw. The offensive line was really banged up. Obviously, Jordan Addison was not in those games either, which is a big part of the offense. So I get it. The only thing I can say is let's just hope the second half looks better. And I think it should. But as far as fantasy football goes, their rest of season schedule is the number 1 easiest fantasy schedule for quarterbacks the rest of the way. So if we're going to see some fantasy points get scored and the development is going to happen, now's the time, JJ.
There we go. All right, give us your last guy, Andrew.
Yeah, so for my last player that I want to talk about, I'm going to bring up, you just brought up a quarterback. Why don't we bring up Cam Ward? Cam Ward's a player that I think we need to have a conversation about because we've talked, you said it didn't look great to start for JJ McCarthy. it has not looked great to start for Cam Ward either. Was going through his scoring the other day in one of my leagues, and keep in mind, this is a 6-point passing touchdown league. 50% of his games in a 6-point passing touchdown league have been 9 points or less. 50% of his games. And you're getting 6 points for the passing touchdown. It's just not been good for Cam Ward. I think he was, in general, a quarterback prospect that felt a little bit overhyped, a little bit raw, maybe needed some development, didn't go into the right situation. And I don't want to get too much of my takes off right off the rip, but quarterback 31, I mean, he's been about the worst quarterback you could have in fantasy right now, the worst starting quarterback all year. So I got to ask you, Garrett, he was a guy that a lot of people liked in Superflex drafts this year, drafted him probably in the top 5, 6-ish picks of their Superflex drafts. How worried are you about Cam Ward?
I'm really worried. I'm really worried about Cam. And we talked about it on the main flagship show 3 weeks ago or so. And it's not gotten better since then. It's rough. I mean, it's really rough. When you look at that offense and you look at what they have given to him, they've given him nothing, which is really difficult for a quarterback. The offensive line has not, it's been okay. I don't want to make it sound like the offensive line's been terrible. When you look numerically, they've been average, which is fine. You would hope for better than that for your quarterback, but we've seen a lot of quarterbacks with the 31st, the 32nd ranked offensive line. So they've been okay. But he has no receivers to catch the football. The one guy that you were hoping was going to be solid and steady, and Calvin Ridley, has not been solid and steady and is now hurt as well. Tyler Lockett just got cut. And they're relying on 3rd and 4th round receivers from this year's draft to be their leading pass catchers. That is not how you set your quarterback up for success. Now, I get it. When you think you have the guy, you have to take him, because there's plenty of times where you don't have the opportunity to take the guy. And so they had the opportunity to take the guy, and they thought he was the guy. So I get why they did it. But in a perfect world, you would love for quarterback to be one of the final pieces as opposed to the first piece and them having to take all these lumps. That being said, we mentioned Drake May. We saw last year a very, very similar situation for Drake May as we're seeing right now from Cam Ward. Drake May was still putting up numbers. Now, were they elite numbers? No. But from a fantasy perspective and from an NFL perspective, you're like, dang, he's running the ball at a really high ineffective rate. Like he's been really efficient when he runs the football. He's been making some plays that you're like, holy cow, how did he make that play? Like there were those signs where he had Drake May had the 32nd ranked offensive line last year. His best receiver was a guy trying to emerge in Kayshon Boutte, but then you also had like Pop Douglas and similar type of wide receiver situation. His best asset was his tight end and Hunter Henry. And the running game was bad. Like there just wasn't anything in that offense, but yet you still saw something there that you're like, wow, this kid might have something. I haven't seen that at all from Cam Ward yet. Is it entirely his fault? No. But is it partially his fault? Yeah, I think it is. And so for me, my panic, like sometimes quarterbacks just get broken really early because of the team around them really failing them. And it's never been an offense that's fit his skill set. He's not a rhythm quarterback. He's an off schedule type player. And it just, everything that could go wrong has seemingly gone wrong for Cam Ward. I do feel for the guy a little bit because, like I said, I don't think this is entirely his fault, but my worry's pretty high. I have him at an 8.
Yeah, I was kind of debating between like 8.5 or 9 for me with Cam Ward, but that's kind of right where I'm at. I'll put him at an 8.5. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt being a young kid. So, there is chance for development here. Just like I said with JJ McCarthy, it's not always linear. However, the sample size for Cam Ward is a little bit larger. It's about 4 times the sample size that we had there of McCarthy. So I think the big thing for me is This is a player in my pre-draft scouting where I felt like there was tools that he had. Obviously, the arm strength, I think, is very talented. He has the ability to throw out of structure, like you said, off rhythm throws and make these like crazy arm angle throws as well. And it feels like that's good. The accuracy had struggled a little bit, I think, for him in college. It is translated over here. There was times, especially in college, where I thought he has athleticism. He has the ability to pick up some chunk plays, kind of similar to how Mahomes can if he just tucks it and goes and makes that decision to not fight and hold the ball too long and try and let these develop. He can just pick up first downs if he runs. And he left that on the bone a lot in college. And it's showing up again here. I think he's holding the ball too long in college. He's taking sacks. And the big worry for me is the fact that we are now 8 games into the career and we have 5 passing touchdowns and 6 interceptions. I mean, he's turning the ball over more than they're scoring for them there in Tennessee. And like you said, it's not all his fault. The weapons are horrible. But there's a point where it's like, okay, so say this year they do, go get a top receiver. Is one wide receiver that you spent premium draft capital on enough to fix the whole disaster of the offense? I don't know. I would hope it could, but I don't know if it's fully going to. This feels like kind of how you said, the Titans were not ready to get a quarterback. And if they felt like they got their guy, they get their guy. But it feels like they still needed to build a ecosystem around Cam Ward for him to be successful before they went and got the quarterback. I don't think it would have hurt them that much to go out there this year and play whoever you got to play at the quarterback position and draft, offensive line and receivers and things like that higher and just go about it that way. And then next year or in 2027, you're taking your franchise guy. That guy would be set up way more for success. So Cam Ward, player I wasn't super high on in the pre-draft process, but in the NFL so far, it hasn't been good at all. So I'm going to give him an 8.5.
All right, let's get to our final player here. And there was a lot of rumblings about this guy early on, but then I feel like it's been very little talk about him. And because, there's been some bye weeks and some injuries and some things like that, but let's bring it back up. Let's try to figure out where we're at on him. Where are we at on Marvin Harrison Jr.? So for me right now, when I'm looking at him, I have to, where did it go? It's funny because these guys were all clumped together. Right now we have Brian Thomas Jr. at 35 overall, Nico Collins at 36 overall, Marvin Harrison Jr. at 37 overall. Now he just had his bye week this week. And like I mentioned, he did miss part of a game due to a concussion. And then he was able to actually make it back, but didn't play amazing in that game, only 7.8 points. So not great in that game. He had his bye this week. Andrew, for you, how much of this is Marv? How much of this is Kyler? How much of this is the offense? Is it some combination of all three? Where are you at with Maserati Marv?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound a cop-out, but it is a combination of all three to me. I think if you had to point to one of the three things that is the biggest of the issues, to me, it's Drew Petzing and the offensive play calling here in Arizona. I don't think he's using Marvin in the best way possible. I mean, you talked about it with Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas a little bit, where it's like trying to get these guys some layup routes, get them some easy touches early on, get them going as an X wide receiver, and then you can let the big plays develop. That has not been what Petzing has done with Marvin Harrison the entirety of his career here in Arizona so far. It has been let Marv run the big boy, deep routes, post routes, and Kyler and his arm will find him when they find him. And that has led to a lot of inconsistency from Marvin. You get the spike weeks where if he gets into the end zone, you're like, yeah, Marvin scored me 18, 20 points. But then you have the weeks where he doesn't score a touchdown and you're like, he scored me 7, like you said with that most recent game. And so I think that's kind of been the issue with Marvin is the play calling. I don't foresee Drew Petzing keeping his job going into 2026 here in Arizona. I think it has been bad enough. That may also come, though, with a quarterback change in Arizona. I think Kyler Murray is running out of time as the franchise quarterback here for the Cardinals. They may need a change of pace. What will that mean for Marvin? I have no idea. At this point in time, how I'm viewing Marvin is probably based off of pre-draft notions and expectations, not what people are going to want to hear. He's a wide receiver 2 in fantasy for me. I don't think he's a wide receiver 1. I don't foresee wide receiver 1 numbers being a consistent theme for him unless we see drastic changes in the play calling. And at this point in time, that's going to be somebody that, based off of those pre-draft costs, you're going to be disappointed in. So I just think we need to have a whole mindset shift on Marvin Harrison moving forward. I have officially left the thoughts of wide receiver 1 being in the range of outcomes for him. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think it's going to sound kind of crazy, but I think he's more Devonta Smith, more Jordan Addison, more T. Higgins-ish type of wide receiver than he is to what people wanted him to be, which was Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson levels of wide receiver. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with him. If I have to give you a panic meter, I'm going to give you – it's hard for me to give you a panic meter because I think I've come to the conclusion of what he is. So I think for that, I'm not super panicked. But I'm going to give you a 6 as yes, I'm panicked about him, but I hope that the way that I break that down kind of helps the listeners know how I'm viewing him moving forward.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. And I look at him right now. He's my wide receiver 17 in Dynasty. So firmly a wide receiver 2, kind of like you said. And I think my panic meter is probably going to be my lowest one. I have him at a 4.5. But I think it is partly because of what you just said. If I was still viewing him as he has the ceiling of a top 5 dynasty wide receiver, then I'm extremely panicked. But I think I'm more comfortable with him being in that tweener range. I still think there's hope of him being a low end wide receiver 1, that wide receiver 9 through 12. I still think that's in the range of outcomes. The biggest thing that I've been a little bit worried about is, you look at guys like those top end guys, those Amon-Ra's, those Jamar Chases. They have a certain attitude about them when they play that Marv just does not seem to have at this point. And that's been the biggest thing on Marv. Because like you said, I think Petzing's part of it. I think Kyler's part of it. I think all of those things have contributed to this. But the thing that Marvin can do that I have not seen out of him is I have not seen that fierce determination to be that guy. And that's the thing that's missing, because from a raw talent perspective, he has as much talent as arguably anybody in football. But he doesn't have the mentality, seemingly. I'm not between his ears. I don't know. But from what I can tell on the outside looking in, that quote unquote dog, it just doesn't seem to be there. And that's the weird thing for me, because if you have that body, you have that pedigree, you have that that school that you went to, you have that draft capital, you have all of these things, you should think that you would carry an air of superiority over everyone. Just I have always been the guy, I am the guy, let me show you why I'm the guy. And I think it's almost been the opposite, where he's had all of it, and then he's just been yeah, it's okay.
It's a level of nonchalantness to it where it's this is normal. And so I don't care as much maybe. And I don't, again, I don't really want to say that, because like you said, it's I never talk to the guy, don't know the guy, don't know the thoughts and things in between the ears. But it's there's just this level that you walk around with. And to kind of echo what you said, you don't need to, not everybody's Malik Neighbors. I don't need that aggressive level of dog where it's we know Malik Neighbors knows who he is and what he expects of himself. Not everybody has to do that. I don't think even guys like Justin Jefferson and those guys are that level of outspokenness. I'm him, I'm the guy. But there's this thing that floats around you where it's that guy knows
Yeah,
he's the
they
number
carry
one wide
themselves a
receiver.
certain way.
Yeah. And so I agree with Marvin. It's been like that. And I think it's also like the one thing to me that was a little bit eye opening was, what was that, week 4 against Seattle when he caught that touchdown and kind of had that moment where it was like, is he crying? Like, is he,
Right.
breaking
It
down
was
here?
very
Because it's like
emotional to me.
an emotional moment where he caught a touchdown. And it's like, dude, this is a regular season game. That's a regular touchdown. Like, it shouldn't feel that heavy for you unless there's a level of like, I'm letting the outside noise get to me here.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I feel for him in a way because the expectations probably with the name that you have and the pedigree and everything that we talked about that you've had, that probably sits heavy on the shoulders.
Yeah.
But it just feels like right now, Marvin isn't giving us what we need from him as a receiver. The offense isn't giving us what we need from him as a play caller. And definitely the quarterback play hasn't been what we needed from, hey, we got to get this guy the touches from the quarterback. So it's kind of a mix of everything. I hope so. I hope that, some changes in a play caller, maybe changes in a quarterback and all of these things help Marvin Harrison. But for now, that's a lot of change for me to try and bake into analysis. And it's just not always, it seems obvious to us and what we want to happen for these fantasy assets. These teams don't care. Sometimes it's just like, we got the guy in the building that we like, Drew Petzing. He's a glue guy for our building. We like him, culture guy, whatever it is. Like, we're willing to put up with it. Sometimes that happens. So, it's hard to project that, but hope Marvin can get to that. For me, he's just a wide receiver 2 right now, though.
All right. Well, that wraps up our panic meter. Let us know in the comments below. Where's your panic meter on these players? Are you out of 10 for some of them? Are we overreacting? We should be closer to a 1 on some of these guys. Let us know in the comments below, and make sure to like and subscribe everything, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Apple Pods, whatever it is. Make sure that you're locked in with everything that we're doing over here at Dynasty Nerds. We're going to keep bringing you all that content that you're looking for, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.